I'm Jessica McCall, and on behalf of the Raben Group and our partner for this evening, the Black Women's Health Imperative, thank you for joining us. Tonight, we'll move beyond the Beltway bubble and hear from women around the country. Our conversation will be moderated by Errin Haines, editor-at-large at the 19th News. Errin is an award-winning political journalist, a founding mother of the 19th, and an MSNBC contributor. And I have to say, she's not just a contributor. She's more like, stop what you're doing because someone's making a whole lot of sense. That's Errin. And I'm so glad she's here with us today because every time I hear her, she makes me smarter. And before we get started, a quick note. My colleagues and I were very intentional about the group of women we pulled together this evening. Some of them have lives that require them to be more visible than some of the other participants. But in our minds, they're all stars. But tonight, we're giving them this space to be people. Everyone has joined us in their personal capacity, not as a representative of an organization or office. And so we ask you, our viewers, to extend them grace and grant them the space to speak their minds. Yes, of course, you can hold people accountable for their comments, but canceling people only shuts down conversations that we know are worthwhile. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Errin Haines.
Well, thank you, Jessica, and good evening to all of you. As was mentioned, my name is Errin Haines, and I'm editor-at-large for the 19th, which is a new nonpartisan newsroom focused on the intersection of gender, policy, and politics. And I'm just really excited and privileged to be joining a conversation that feels just both really necessary and really urgent, with just 4 days left to go until Election Day. And on that note, I want to thank all of you for also tuning in and really making this discussion a priority with everything else that's going on in our country and with everything that I know is no doubt going on in your own lives. As Jessica mentioned, we have convened this evening a group of Black women who are both exceptional and also exemplary for many of us who know what Black women have long been doing and are currently doing on behalf of our households, our communities, and frankly, this democracy, to reflect on what has already been an extraordinary year. Indeed, I would say 2020 has been chaotic and challenging in many ways, but it has also been a year focused on the leadership and excellence of Black women, which suggests to me that the nation may finally be heeding the call to listen to Black women. And it is that triumph and tragedy that we seek to highlight together tonight. So we've got a lot to get to, and I want to let you all know how this discussion is going to go. We're going to split this up into 3 sections, each lasting about half an hour. The first section is going to be Black women and the pandemic. Then we're going to move on to Black women and the ballot. And then we're going to wrap up with Black women rising. These topics reflect the results of a survey of the priorities of tonight's participants and what is on their minds as they head to the polls in the most consequential election most of us will ever live through. Now, before we get started, I just want to show you guys a map of where we've got people tuning in from, our participants, where they're tuning in from around the country. If we can do that really quick before we get started, I was fascinated to see just how many places people are zooming in from tonight. I mean, just look at the geographic diversity. At the 19th, we believe in having conversations that are diverse in geography and perspective, and I think that is something that you're going to see reflected tonight. So that just makes me really excited, for the parts of the country that we're going to hear from. And we know that this is going to be a national conversation, but I just wanted you guys to see that for yourselves. So thank you for posting that. Okay, and so with that, I want to welcome our first discussion group to discuss Black women and the pandemic. And before we get started, I just want to point out a few statistics that I think will help to frame our conversation. We at the 19th have written a lot about the pandemic, which has been devastating for Black women, who started this year with the highest labor force participation of any female group, 63%. And that's compared to 58% of white women, by the way. Black women are also starting new businesses at the fastest rate of any group. But 7 in 10 Black women are also the primary or only breadwinner in their households. That's twice the rate for white women now. And yet we have less wealth. And even before the pandemic, Black women were spending more hours a week on childcare than white women. Now, these are disparities that we have highlighted along with the current crisis overall for Black women in the COVID-19 crisis in our coverage at the 19th. And I encourage you all to follow our reporting as we continue to focus on these issues. And now we're going to move to our panelists. And I just really want to start because, as we said, we're here in our personal capacities as well. And I want to start by asking just a few of our participants, how are you balancing the pandemic personally and professionally as a Black woman? And I think I want to start with Lillian. Lillian, are you there? Let me see. I thought I saw there's so many, this is such a beautiful thing, two full Zoom screens of Black women. If Lillian's not in here yet, let me go to Alexis.
Good evening. How's everyone? It's great to be here this evening with everyone. In terms of balancing the pandemic, I think, trying to just balance the realities of work, the realities of what's going on in the world around us certainly have been and continues to be something that I have tried to create balance for in my life. I think it hit me hardest more so in my work in the nonprofit sector and just seeing what we know to be true in the disparities that already existed and how much they were highlighted and uplifted for me personally in trying to, in creating balance, deal with that just personal emotional stress and watching, my people suffer or our people suffer in greater ways was more of a challenge to me than just my personal pursuits, but more so just trying to figure out how I could be solutions oriented and help, but understanding that many things were out of my control. So just doing what I can and continuing to reconcile, with the fact that we can only control so much.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Marilyn, I want to come to you because, the dual pandemics that we're dealing with are something that I think I'd love to hear from you about if you could speak to that. But yeah, just personally and professionally, how has the pandemic affected you?
So I think it's affected us as women differently than it has anyone else, and especially as Black women, being the foundation of our communities. I am the state's attorney for Baltimore City. I run an office of 403 employees, 217 attorneys. But at the same time, I have two little girls that are 10 and 12 years old, and having to try to figure out and to balance what that means for them educationally, like staying on them to ensure that they're doing what they need to do virtually, has been a challenge. And so, on top of the personal sort of sacrifice, because in the initial stages of the pandemic, I was principal, I was teacher, I was, state's attorney, I was HR rep, I was everything. But on top of that, what I've seen, on top of the personal sort of sacrifices that we make as Black women, and understanding the familial sort of sacrifice that we have to make as women, and ensuring that our children are progressing, I've challenged what justice really is. Yeah. Right? Like during this pandemic, I think that the world has been challenged. And what we understand and what we recognize is that in the matter of 5 days, we will be voting for the most important election of our lifetime, because justice is literally on the ballot for our children and our grandchildren. We know what injustice looks like. Injustice looks like failing to put on a turn signal and ending up dead. Injustice looks like allegedly selling a loose cigarette and ending up dead. We know what injustice looks like. It means allegedly passing a $20 bill during a global pandemic and having the life sucked out of you for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We know what injustice looks like, but what does justice look like? And so, having to reevaluate that as the top prosecutor in one of the major cities in the country, it's been eye-opening. Just being in this role as a Black woman, understanding the system that I represent, and also understanding the role that I play in reforming and dismantling these systems of oppression.
Absolutely. And you bring up such a good point, Marilyn. Just show of hands really quick. How many of you in here are moms that are currently educating children, dealing with the virtual learning piece? Yeah, while also trying to do your day job. Absolutely. Yeah. Do we have anybody in here who is the primary breadwinner for their household right now? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And do we have anybody who either know someone who had coronavirus, passed away from coronavirus, or had coronavirus themselves? Look at that. Keep your hands. I just want people to see this. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. Heather, can I come to you and ask you to talk about your experience?
Yes, you can. I work in education and I work in philanthropy. And so I've had the opportunity to work throughout, but this education issue is very real. As a single mom, as the breadwinner, somebody on my work team was COVID positive, someone in my family. I'm relatively middle class, upper middle class, so I can marshal resources. But what we see, particularly in our work around education, is that Black families are essential workers.
Yes.
So Black children, remote school is not enough. Half of the communities do not have access just to broadband and digital.
Yes.
And right now, there's a rush to go back to school, but our families don't want to go back to school because they're not going to make a life and death choice to walk out the door unless they know that they can get quality, and we weren't getting quality before. So all of these things are present in mind. And I feel like there's a lot of global conversation about women having to trade off, taking care of the home and doing all of that. And I think that's really true. But I also feel like we have a lot of solutions. And so there are my friend Kenya's on the call. And one of the conversations we've been having is to reinforce the strengthening narrative about Black mothers, Black families, and what we have to offer our children educationally, and have that be the new frame for what we go back to. We're not going to go back to this mediocre stuff. Yeah. Not only are we not going to walk out of our door because for life and death for an unequal education, but when we come back, we expect more.
Yeah.
And we respect it to be affirming.
Yeah.
And the children see that and we see that. So I think that's really important.
Hang on now, you brought up Kenya. Kenya, let's get into the group chat. What were you and Heather talking about? What is the new way forward? What can the new normal be with Black women obviously leading the way?
I think one of the key pieces around the new normal is us valuing the role that parents play in the education of their children in a way that this has exposed us to. So we are much more proximal to our children's education in a way now than we have ever been before. And I think one of the key things about it is that we want to co-design what that education looks like in the future instead of being told what we should get and what we shouldn't. You are seeing right now a movement around women saying, I am a Black woman. I want my children to learn about an Afrocentric education. If you are Latinx, you are hearing women say the same thing. What we have to know is we should not have to design those pieces on the outskirts of education. Those are the components that should be built into how our children are being educated on a daily basis. And that should be that's the new normal of what we go back to. The last piece is what this has taught for me is all of the things that we have been told, oh, that's not possible, are possible now. Like that is what this showed me. So people had said, oh, we couldn't do digital learning. We couldn't get devices to all of our children. We couldn't do all of those things have been done now. And so how are we bold and audacious around what we want for our children and our communities going forward? For me, that's where I sit in this space right now.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Never show Black women what's possible because there's no going back after that, right? There's no going back for us after we know what you can do. And that, you know, this just comes down to a matter of choices. And Kenny, I just really love what you said too. really just about the idea that it's not just about a seat at the table. It's about having a role in really shaping what the new normal is going to look like going forward, and valuing the experience, the lived experience and expertise that Black women bring to this education piece, and the, because we've been filling in the gaps that have not been happening in the public education system, right? But really kind of normalizing and formalizing that in a real way going forward, because it's needed. I asked Marilyn about the dual pandemics of coronavirus and systemic racism, which we know are taking a particular toll on Black households. I want to talk to some of you about really this climate with the dual pandemics and how you are feeling from a safety perspective in this climate. If you consider racism a public health issue, frankly, and if you feel the threat of COVID-19 more or less than the threat of police violence in your daily lives or in the lives of your loved ones. Let me see, let's go to Dana, are you in here? Hi, Dana. Yes, there you are. Oh, wait, I think you're on mute. Oh, wait, I can't hear you. Nope, we can't hear you. I wonder why. Well, until I'm going to come back to you, Dana, and I want to go to Pamela. Hi, Pamela.
Oh, hello, ladies.
That's a lovely background, by the way. You would get 10 out of 10 on Room Rater from me.
Oh, thank you. So I'm in Detroit, sisters, and we were one of the first hotspots in the country at the beginning of the year, and now cases are rising again. I'm in the dance community. I'm also in education. I'm at the Detroit Public Schools Foundation, but I'm in the dance community in Detroit. And anybody that knows about Detroit, like, we love to dance. We love music. We love to dance. We lost probably 20 people in the dance community between March and April. We actually got all of our children a device. We raised $23 million, got every child a device, internet, and technical support. But what I want to talk about is the trauma that we are all going to be suffering and have suffered post-COVID, post-election. Our children were exposed to trauma before all of this, before 2020. But I am very concerned about my own mental health, our children's mental health, women's mental health, as we do. We carry the brunt of the load. We carry the load for our families, our communities. We've got the protests on top of everything else, Black Lives Matter. It is just feeling very, very heavy right now. And I'm not sure we're talking about it enough. And I know we're not getting enough help. I know we're not seeking professional help. And so how are we balancing it all? Back to your first question, I'm not sure we're doing a really good job of it. Our children, we have high poverty in Detroit. It's really been a tough 10 months. And I'm worried about how we're gonna all look post 2020 in terms of our mental health and in terms of just being women and having so much of the load on us each and every day when things are normal, whatever that word means. So thank you.
Yeah. And let me just say, certainly my condolences to you. That 20 people in your community, that is devastating. And we are not talking enough about the mental health toll that COVID has taken, our loved ones passing away, that really barely being even addressed or acknowledged at the federal level right now. And just the mental health piece that is, added on with the added layer of racism, what that is doing to us as Black people and Black women in particular every day, it really is devastating. Renita, I saw you nodding your head down there. I wonder if you could share kind of what you were thinking, listening to Pamela, and what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just been a lot, like it has been for everybody. For me, I have two young kids. I have a husband. And I also work in a criminal justice agency for the municipality here in New York. And so the things that we have witnessed over this time have been, especially, I would say, traumatizing for us as a community, because we know the communities that were most impacted by all of these social stressors and injustices before have been bearing the brunt of everything that's been happening now. So
And
we weren't getting,
Renita, how old are your children?
my children are 2 and 6.
And with the 6-year-old, are you having conversations with him about the racial reckoning? Is he asking, or is he asking questions about what's going on with the
Absolutely.
pandemic and racism?
I have
Talk to me about what is
Yeah.
that like? What is that like for you as a mom and a Black woman?
I have a daughter. My daughter is 6. And so,
Okay.
you know, that's a different level of identification. I'm from South Central LA originally. And, you know, my daughter is growing up with much more privilege than I grew up with. But at the same time, she's growing up with 2 parents who are my husband's from Brownsville, Brooklyn. So her 2 parents are very steeped in their culture and the communities that they come from. And so we're very transparent with her about the reality of the situation for Black folks in America. And so she's watching all of the injustice unfold. She has a ton of questions about police officers. She knows what I do. She knows that I interact with criminal justice actors, including police officers. She has a lot of questions about who's good and who's bad and the racial dynamics in this country. And I try to answer that as best I can in an age appropriate way. You know, of course, I let her know that it's important to judge every individual on their own merits and how they treat you. But I also let her know that we come from a system, this country was built on a system of racial oppression, and that continues to this day, and that it's apparent and it's prevalent in every single system that we interact with. And so, you know, unfortunately, I'm having the talk with her that my parents had with me about being excellent in all things, in working hard and making sure that she is, you know, showing out basically everywhere she goes. And she does that. Her teachers tell me she's helping to teach the class and she's vocal and she's verbalizing all these things. And that's super important to me, but it's also sad that we still are having to tell our kids and teach our kids these things in 2020 that our parents were telling us 30 and 40 and 50 years ago. And it's like, when exactly does it stop? And for me, we also try to teach my daughter, it's not about trying to prove something to someone else. It's really about how she views herself and what aspirations she has for herself. But at the same time, we want her to be aware of the conditions in this country, because we don't ever want her to be walking around with her eyes closed. And we'll do the same for my son, who is 2 now, but is very smart and, you know, will one day be just as vocal as his sister.
Yeah, well, they are both very blessed to have the both of you in this pandemic and in general. Dana, I'm going to try to come back to you here because I want to ask some of you about, as we close out this section, about the sacrifices that you've been making as Black women in the last several months to protect yourself and your family, both against COVID and frankly against, you know, racism that you thought was outside the door, but we're having to deal with that too. So, Dana, can you address that? And we're going to take a couple more of you before we get out of here.
Absolutely. Well, the balance is really no longer existing. I don't know about some of my colleagues here, but I certainly know that on a day-to-day basis, especially in my place of work, it was very interesting as the racist undertones and the injustices started to appear more often in the news. More often, I was being asked to be the representative of the Black community at work.
Hold on. No, keep going. I'm just like,
oh,
wait.
okay. I thought you said, I was like, hey, hold on.
I'm like, no.
It was more than once, right? And certainly that is not who I am. I am but one Black woman. But more often than once, they were asking me, Dana, what should we do? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to call? What check do we need to write?
Right under you for all this free advice.
That's exactly what I said. I said, I'm happy to be a consultant. But I did start to speak up, and it while it was incredibly and emotionally taxing, we kept saying, you know, Black people are tired. We've been having this conversation for hundreds of years, quite literally. But at the same time, it allowed me the opportunity to have an audience with our company CEO, with some of our largest executives, and to be able to bring my whole self to work in a way that I'd never been able to do before. in a respectful way, telling them how hard it is to both balance the life that we leave outside of work and the face that we put on every single day in front of them versus who we are behind closed doors with our family and our friends and our sister girls behind the scenes. And so fortunately, I do believe that a lot of organizations, including mine, were able to take advantage of that. They started to hear Black voices in a way that they never had before, and are actually starting to take action. But at the same time, what I was also really proud to see a lot of Black people at work do was to say, we're tired, we're done talking now, and we're going to go and take care of ourselves. So that meant I'm not sitting in every single meeting where you're talking about this. I am not giving you a book list to read. I am going to shut off my computer because I've been sitting here all day, 6 to 6, and I'm going to have dinner with my family. And I'm going to call my mama, and I'm going to cry with my sisters, and I'm going to have a glass of wine on this Zoom call with some friends. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were heard and we were allowed to do that, which I am glad about.
Yeah. Tony, I see you nodding your head over there. I'm wondering if you can chime in on this about some of what Dana was talking about. Is this something that you're experiencing too? Or what are some of the sacrifices that you're making in the middle of this pandemic to deal with either coronavirus and or racism?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm coming from the perspective of being a life coach. I'm an accountability and life coach, and I have multiple clients that I work with that are Black women and women of color who are trying to continue to move their lives forward with these circumstances. And I think that one of the things, as I've looked through the year, that we haven't really had the opportunity to take in is the grief that we have for the future we thought we were going to have. And I'm really, for me, it's about, sometimes it's committed listening, and sometimes it's, really trying to help people deal with the uncertainty and build a space for, being resilient and ready for what's next, if it's the next day and all of that. And it's just really tough. For me, the sacrifice is I still find that I have to, not have to, but I'm asked to make white people feel okay about their whiteness. And that is harder and harder for me to do. And I think it's 2020, maybe it's because I'm a little older, but that's the challenge. And I have had all of those calls. I went to a private school growing up and have had, people throughout my life, a lot of white people I love dearly, but the questions and the calls and the being a resource for how they feel about things has been very challenging. And that is something that even as a coach, because I'm being asked in a personal way, is a place where I have to really I still have to temper some of my conversation. And for me personally, that's a sacrifice. That's not a space I really am trying to be in as I move forward. And I applaud so many of these, women here who are in a place where they can always speak out. And I would, I think it's something we're all striving for. I am also concerned about the fallacy of the friendly Democrat. So we can talk about that when we get to voting, but we're going to vote for who we need to vote for, but there's a whole other conversation about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely move into that. Martin Luther King talked about the danger of the white liberal, and we can certainly get to that when we move on. But this is a good note To end on Tony, I feel like I need some of your life coaching, listening to you there, and you know, for you and for anybody else that is encountering this in the workplace, you know, tell them like I tell them, do your own work, because we're at the beginning of this journey. This racial reckoning has just begun, and you know, frankly, having covered race in America for the better part of a decade, I know that this kind of ebbs and flows in terms of their interests sometimes, but this is not. This is our lived experience. This is not, you know, a season for us, and it should not be for them, because this is everybody's country, and they, you know, we should all care, and we should all want things to be different on the other side of both of these pandemics. So thank you to those of you so far who have weighed in on a very robust already conversation, but we got a lot more women to get to and a lot more to talk about. So I want to turn to our next topic, which is Black women and the ballot, one of my favorite topics. And so in 2016, Black women overwhelmingly voted for Hillary Clinton, who won the popular vote but did not become president, as we know. But the election woke up much of the media, frankly, and the political class to the reality that Black women have long been a force, particularly in Democratic politics. And Black women, fed up with being valued for their output but not their input, are demanding more than a seat at the table. They are seeking the power that they have earned as the perfecters of our democracy. Black women this year stand to be among the deciders of the 2020 election. We already know that women are the majority of the early voters, even in the midst of a pandemic. Black women were crucial to the Democratic primary process, and this fall have been voting and organizing in numbers some say could rival the 2008 and 2012 elections. So I want to talk about what's driving Black women this year and what this could mean for policy that could impact our lives. So let's talk about some of that with our guests. And I want to start by asking those of you who said that this election was a priority for you, what is really at the forefront of your mind this election cycle? And you know, I think I want to start here with Dr. Crutcher. Tiffany, can you talk about what's on your mind as you are participating in this election?
Absolutely. I think someone stated earlier that we're in a state of emergency as it relates to being Black in America. And of course, my lived experience is that my brother was killed by the police. And so what I would say is that Terrence's blood is on that ballot box. Breonna Taylor's blood is on that ballot box. Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd. And so I'm wishing and praying and fighting hard that we get a new DOJ, a new Department of Justice. And so we need this victory come Tuesday with this new administration. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we hold Vice President Biden accountable and my soror, Kamala Harris, Senator Harris accountable. Had the privilege of speaking with her, and I asked her a few tough questions, you know, sorority sister aside, what are you gonna do your first 30, 60, 90 days if elected to ensure that Black lives matter? And that's where I am with it. I had an aha moment. I realized that respectability politics is no longer working, where we're wishing and praying and hoping that the oppressor does right by us one day. They're never gonna do right. And so, you know, I'm out here right now, you know, making sure whatever it takes, putting signs out, knocking on doors, dropping literature. And I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but again, as we stated earlier, this double pandemic is crazy. It's crazy. And I'm exhausted. And all I can think about is James Baldwin's words. To be Black in America and to be woke or conscious is to be in a state of rage. Every single day we get up and put our feet on the ground. And so quite frankly, I'm exhausted. And, you know, we have to take 5, 10, 15 people to the polls. I've started this rolling to the polls thing right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, safe rides to the poll. And so that's what's on my mind. I'm hoping that we can get a new Department of Justice to start indicting these police officers at the federal level, and also investigating these police agencies or defunding them so we can actually reimagine and rethink what community safety looks like.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for continuing for all of your work and for continuing to bear witness for your twin brother who was wrongly killed, not just tragically, but wrongly lost his life. Just by show of hands in here, for how many of you is criminal justice on the ballot this year? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I write a lot in my work trying to remind people about Black women and their role in this democracy, that racism is 1000% on the ballot. Cheryl, I see you nodding your head up there. I want to ask you to jump in here and just talk about what is on the forefront of your mind as you head to the ballot box.
I am so full right now, Errin. I think this is finally a space where we as women can actually be our authentic selves. We spend so much time putting on masks, and we go in a room and we actually forget the mask that we have on and realize that's not the right mask, and we left that mask in the car. I'm feeling that, and so everything is on my mind. I have 3 adult Black men that I've raised, and I never thought that as a 60-year-old mom, I would have to every night call them to make sure they're okay. Mm-hmm. Every single night I have to hear their voice to make sure, and they're doing amazing things in this world, and I still got to worry about you. So this whole thing about justice and education, I happen to run a nonprofit where families are struggling every day with their kids, trying to educate their kids through this pandemic and worrying about that. So these are all the things that are on my mind. But here's the thing I do know, Errin, that this is our time. I believe we're at a tipping point, and that so we all know Tuesday is coming. Something's going to happen on Tuesday. Whatever happens on Tuesday is still our time. And so I'm excited about that. And that's what I voted 2 months ago. I told somebody earlier, I made sure all my adult kids, got to the polls and did their thing. I did it just like I was taking a kid to kindergarten on their first day. Show me your ballot. Let's go through this and put it in. Let me see. Amen. That's how serious it is for me.
Amen. Listen, I will tell you that I definitely made sure that my mom was voting safely. My mom is somebody who never misses an election. She doesn't care who's on the ballot or what's on the ballot. She is there. And this year was no exception. She mailed her ballot, dropped off her mail-in ballot, voted absentee for the first time, I think, ever. She's normally an early voter down in Georgia. And I was planning on mailing my ballot in. Some of you may have seen, I just wrote an essay that's up on the 19th News' website. I was going to drop off my mail-in ballot, but my mail-in ballot never came. And so I'm in Philadelphia, went and got in line on Monday, the day before the last day of early voting here. And it took me 4 hours. And I share that with you all, not to say, oh, poor Errin, whatever. I'm a journalist. I have 4 hours to stand around in line and wait, to cast my ballot. But there are too many people who do not, especially here. This is the poorest big city in America. Folks don't have time to stand around. They have other responsibilities that they have to do. And, I thought about that. And I thought about the people who, frankly, walked by or drove by and saw that line and kept going. We know that there's going to be disenfranchisement. That is voter suppression and voter depression. Yes, we have tremendous voter excitement and enthusiasm, but that is not a replacement for, or it's not to be confused with the presence of voter suppression in this moment, which we know is happening even in the midst of a pandemic. And so I use my platform to speak out on behalf of those who don't have a platform to express how they were basically attempted to be suppressed. It's unacceptable to me. But I want to,
if I could just jump in and just say, Errin, this is an opportunity for us to recognize that those individuals that are attempting to suppress our votes, we need to hold them accountable. As Black women in this country, not just nationally, but locally, we are the lifeline of our communities, and we have carried the Democratic Party on our backs. And so let's remind them of their attempts to suppress our votes. And let's not forget it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
oftentimes we forget. Let's not forget that they have attempted to suppress our vote in every attempt that they could. There are over, I read an article where there's been over like 400 suits in order to stop us from extending the vote and counting our votes. But we have that power and that ability. And so let's not forget that. And let's use our voices and our power in a way that is going to be reflective of what is needed in this country, which again, we got 5 days. I'm optimistic. We won't get this presidential president out of office. But let's not forget for those individuals that were attempting to stop us from doing that, please.
Yeah, we absolutely cannot leave this until the next election for voter suppression and voter access to be addressed. And so as we are considering governing priorities, I know that Black women are going to be continuing to hold the folks that they elect this cycle accountable on that issue in particular. Now, Genevieve, I saw your beautiful daughter there popping in, that baby. So I got to come to you and ask you about what's on your mind, this year as you head to the ballot box. What are you thinking about? What are your priorities?
Well, I actually don't vote in the United States because I'm not a citizen. I am not a citizen.
Are you otherwise participating in the election?
Absolutely.
Talk about that.
Absolutely. But I do organize for people to go vote, right? Especially within my family. But what's on my mind is US foreign policy. A lot of times we have to also center what's happening to Black people, in my case, in the Americas, because we exist here and we exist there, right? So when we talk about criminal justice, for example, I think it's just really important to hear that in the rest of the region, because of free trade agreements, because of funding for police and trainings that happens from the police in the United States abroad, in a place like Brazil, which is the largest country, right, in the region, in Rio itself, there have been over 606 homicides in 2020. That's in Rio itself. So if we, in United States, the homicides are lower and they get a lot of visibility. But in the region, in Latin America, police brutality has always been happening and is very invisible. And who does it impact? Black people directly.
Yeah.
Right. So if you take that alongside Black women that are activists and human rights defenders being kidnapped, being raped, being disappeared, and being killed, these are issues that are happening directly because of elected officials over here.
Yeah.
And we have to center that. So it's not only around going out to vote, it's also questioning and challenging, what are you doing abroad that is impacting people, especially Black people? Because that same injustice comes back and impacts African Americans here, and it impacts Black people here.
Yeah,
right?
And we've seen the national reckoning happening across the globe, honestly.
Exactly.
Black folks rising up around this planet, to say no more. I want to ask too, so for those who in here has already voted, show of hands, already voted before November 3rd. Yeah, we get it done. We get it done. And who voted in person early? Who went to a precinct and cast their ballot in person? Okay, and what about got a mail-in ballot and mailed it back? Who mailed their ballot in? Oh, well, we're gonna pray over the post office. We're gonna pray over that. And then what about who got their ballot and dropped it off at a polling location? Okay, so I want to, Solana, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I voted by mail, but I live in California.
So you, and I mean, talk to me about how do you feel about the integrity of your vote? How confident do you feel that your vote is going to count? I know California is not new to the early voting and the mail voting process, but talk to me about how you feel about not only your vote, but Black women around the country, that their votes will also be counted this cycle.
I feel good about my own vote, but I also feel that, that's because I've been assured by several institutions that I can track my vote. I know where my vote is going, that everyone in my district was mailed a ballot, right? I can't say that I feel as confident about the rest of not only California, but the rest of the nation. You know, we had, even in LA, we saw fake ballot boxes, right? Being set up. So this is relentless. Oppression is relentless, but we also are relentless. And I think that is what is happening on this call and is being shown in such great ways. This is a tremendous moment. We do have to take care of ourselves. We have to grieve and we have to find joy. We have to mourn and we have to laugh. We have to rest and we have to be bold in our asks. And so, you know, your earlier question about what is on the ballot, for me, economic liberation is on the ballot. And I'll tell you where else it is. It's in the courts. It's in the confirmation hearings for appointees. It's in the streets. It's constant. This election is a moment in time. This is one moment. We have to have the stamina and resilience to keep pressure on, as many folks have said. We deserve a better economy. We deserve economic liberation. We have the political power. Elections have shown us that time and time again. Our job now is to surgically root out racism in this economy in every crevice. And we deserve it. We deserve an economy where our basic needs are met, where we are compensated and valued for all that we add, where we can find safety and security. These are basic things. And it's going to take major investment. And I'm so thrilled for people that are working on people of color that are in the streets and they're like, yep, defund the police, and we want universal health care, and we want guaranteed income, and we want a federal jobs guarantee. We want all the things. We're going to come for it.
Things. Yes, hashtag all the things. I want to bring in Ketchy in here because I know we don't have much longer with you, and I want to get you in here to talk about just what a little bit of what Solana was talking about, but also about you know, we've got some disenfranchised folk who, you know, in the criminal justice system that need to be addressed as well. Folks who could be casting a ballot, should be casting a ballot, and are trying to be kept from doing that, which is also voter suppression. But I want to hear from you about some of your thoughts before we have to let you go.
Yes, thank you.
And we've also got a book that we need to know about. I want everybody to know about.
Yes, thank you so very much. We need to really understand that and remember that Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten to within an inch of her life just for trying to register Black people to vote. Medgar Evers was murdered in his own driveway for that. We need to remember this. I hear so many people talking about, oh, you know, Biden and the crime bill and Kamala Harris, a prosecutor. I mean, I don't care if Biden wrote the crime bill because we're in the process of dismantling that 1994 crime bill right now. I don't care if Kamala Harris used to be a prosecutor. We are very much in touch with her and her staff. People change mentality. I mean, it is not an issue. People need to get out there and vote. There are so many of us who have lost the right to vote as a result of a felony conviction, even when we thought that we had a victory. You know, in Florida, then they go and do the joogie boogie and say, well, you know, you got to pay these fees and fines and stuff like that. You know, these are just more things on top of more things. The more things change, the more they remain the same. We need to really get out. There's so much at stake. I just wrote an article called Handmaiden or Heroine? Will the real Amy Coney Barrett please stand up? I mean, if you all, I want to get into that show about the Handmaiden's Tale, but there's so much at stake, okay? And the first step we need to do is take over the White House. And I tell a lot of this about connecting some of these dots from yesterday to today in my memoir, Black Power, Black Lawyer. I honestly thought I would be on book tours and all like that, but the pandemic happened. But you know, we are a resilient people. I can be in the UK, in California, at Yale Law School, all in the same day because of the technology that we have today. So I just want to say thank you for, you know, everything, and that we need to get out there and vote. I'm going to a presentation now that says reparations is on the ballot. That's the presentation I'm about to go to. My reparations is on the back. You may not see the words there, but I can tell you this and that. If the wrong people are not, if the same person who's in the position now, there will be no chance. We have a chance if we do the right thing in the ballot box.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for hanging with us. I know you got to run because yes, you are in demand and rightly so. So thank you for that. And Black Power, Black Lawyer is available for folks. If you want to read more about that, which I think I will be hitting Amazon Prime as if I need to be back on there as soon as I get out of here. So thank you for that. Before we get out of this conversation though, I want to talk to those of you who I haven't heard from before yet in this panel about your plans, because we know that this is not just about Election Day for Black women, but it is about holding folks accountable on the governing side of this once folks are in office. Your plans to hold whomever is in power, whether that's at the top of the ticket or locally where you live, on the issues that concern you. And I think we can start with Saida. Do you have thoughts on this?
Sure. So, I mean, I think what's kind of top of mind for me right now is I actually did a workshop for young Black girls around what is it they saw for their future. And so I asked them to imagine a world where Black people were free. And the first thing a young Black woman said to me is, I want a Black world where we can make mistakes. I want a world where Black folks can make mistakes. Yeah. And that hit really hard. Like, I think I got off that workshop and just kind of burst into tears. Yeah. Because I think there's this legacy of feeling that in order for us to make it in this world, that we have to be perfect. We have to be aligned in every single thing that we do. And that's hard. That's hard on our bodies. That's hard on our spirits. And, you know, so for me, when I think about holding folks accountable, what I want is us to kind of start moving towards a different world and really naming what is possible for us, right? I'm currently the Vice President of Member Services for YWCA USA. And in that role, we're a major provider of childcare services across the country to communities of color and low-income folks. And we also are the major provider of domestic violence services. And I think what the pandemic has laid bare for us is this reality that so many of these resources are incredibly fragile, and that without the dedicated support to uplift these networks of support that our communities need, they cannot exist. And so I think it's really critical for us to push for this and to push and make sure that these resources are stable and that we in our communities have what we need to flourish and live the lives that we want as free folks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And what you said about us not being able to make mistakes, I mean, that really does bring to mind for me, Breonna Taylor, who I have written about, wrote the first national story about her situation. You know, certainly none of us are perfect, but that does not mean that she should not be here. And so I definitely understand why that made you emotional. I mean, that is powerful. When will we be in that kind of a world, right? Dr.
Oh, sorry. And if I can interject too, one of the things that has felt so painful throughout all of this with seeing all of the Black folks who have been killed, Black trans women, is that what we're known by is the way that we die. Right? Like, none of us will ever get to know Breonna Taylor for who she is. None of us will ever get to know all of these really beautiful Black women, non-binary folks for who they were. And I think that's something that we really need to reckon with and consider as a people as well.
Yes, yes, the lives that folks lived and not just the trauma of how they were taken. Dr. Robinson, I thought I saw you nodding your head there a bit. Can I bring you into this, just into this conversation? What's on your mind? What's making you nod in agreement here? Oh wait, you're on mute.
It's all the things. Like, that is our new hashtag, I think.
Yes, it is.
When I think about this particular space that we're in, I mean, there's so much going on in terms of education and what's happening to our children every single day in terms of going back to school, not going back to school, can they go back, should they go back? And they weren't really getting an equitable education when they were there. And so do we want them to go back? I mean, like, when I think about what this is bringing up for me in terms of this election, it is the educational system, that is too closely connected to our criminal justice system. And in what is happening when I have a 19-year-old son. So I have to say that one of the things that I felt with him is immense pride and fear all at the same time. My son was out in the street protesting, super proud that he felt like he could be out there, that he was doing what he felt was best. But when I tell you all, I couldn't breathe the entire time he was there. And so it is this sort of push and pull. I have a 13-year-old daughter who is here at home doing school and misses her friends at school. And so this pandemic is on the ballot. Criminal justice is on the ballot. Education is on the ballot. I mean, when people say that this is one of the most important elections of our time, I really believe it is, because I don't think in my lifetime that I've ever seen this kind of crazy. Like, I know that we've had all types of presidents, and our country has been through a lot. And this isn't the worst time that Black people have experienced in this country. Nothing in my mind tops being brought over as free people and being enslaved. But we are in a time where I think we thought we moved the needle. And I feel like, yes, we moved the needle, but not as far as we thought we had. Yeah. And that, I'm feeling the pressure of my ancestors. You know, my grandmother would say, I paid my NAACP dues so that my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren would have better. And so I'm beginning to think, you know, were her dues enough? Like, what? So I feel like I'm ready to fight every day. Like, I feel like I'm ready to just go out and battle and fix all the things. But then at the same time, I feel like I want to sit down because I'm exhausted, and the grief and the loss that we are experiencing as a community. I don't know if we always think about how that collective racial trauma impacts our mental health, both singularly and collectively. And so it is this sort of space of, I have to be out there. I have to battle for my youth, my families that I serve, but I also have to take a step back and sit and be careful, because I have to also provide support to my own family and my own husband and my own children. And it's one of those things where Black women hold up the world. And so that's why it's such an honor to be in this space with all of you. But I want to remind us that as we're holding up the world, we also have to take care of ourselves and remember that we aren't anything to anybody if we can't be what we need for ourselves. And so this election is critical, but I think that we are also just at the heart critical. We have to be critical and think about what we need for ourselves and how to keep ourselves intact so that we can do all this hard work.
That's absolutely right. This election is consequential, but Black women are truly essential, not just in this moment, but all the time. And we do hold up the world, but we also hold each other up. And events like these, I think, just really kind of underscore that. This first hour has already been more helpful to me than all of you know. Let me just say that. So I want to end this on a high note, though, because I mean, so many of you are doing the work. Lisa Cortez, I want to bring in here, who is director of All In, the Fight for Democracy. And Lisa, can I just get you, for those of us who are tuning in, to share some of the resources that are available for folks who still want to be in this fight here, between now and the election and possibly beyond, because we know November 3rd is not going to necessarily be the end of this thing.
Thank you so much, Errin, and thank you, sisters. This conversation is like a bomb in Gilead. You know, I swing between rage and sadness in a cycle that I have never experienced internally before. But we are a collective, and we are all over the country, but it's interesting how we are of the hive mind. And to me, our hive mind right now is that as long as their knees are on our necks, we are going to hold their feet to the fire. You know, there is no more space. There is, this is a time for radical faith to really empower what we do. So with All In, the Fight for Democracy, the film I directed and produced with Liz Garbus and also with Stacey Abrams, we look at the history of voter suppression and voting rights. And if anything, to understand this moment, we have to understand the past, because the past is truly the prologue to this crazy time that we're in. I want to share that what we were able to do with Amazon Studios is right now on the Amazon Prime YouTube channel, the film is available for free through Sunday. On top of that, and it's free globally. On top of that, if you go to our website, allinforvoting.com, we have resources to help you engage, to figure out how to, well, at this point, it's a little too late to become a poll worker, but just to how to, find out where to register. And more importantly, we have curriculums there that you can download, discussion guides, civics, history lessons that are suitable for high school and college students. When we started this film, we created this impact concurrently because it was always important for us that we could meet our people where they are. And so if knowing this history is something that you want to share with your community, I wanted to offer this tool. I spoke to some young people last night who said that after they understood the cyclical nature of the power play of voter suppression, of the weaponization and targeting on our community, that these kids actually went out and registered. So we are in a voting season. It's a season that's going to go on for a long time, but we are not alone. I hope that everyone stays well, protects their heart, and we lean into the spirit of Sojourner Truth. We lean into the spirit of Mary Church Terrell and Ida B. Wells, and the list goes on. This is a time to lean into spirit, because we wouldn't have gotten here without them. Good night, ladies.
Absolutely. And let me just put in a plug for this film, because it is excellent. I have seen it. It is very powerful, and frankly will take you into next week with a note of optimism, I would say. So if you haven't seen it, thank you for noting that is available for free for folks. Maybe there can be some watch parties with some of you ladies that are hanging out. Let me know if that's happening. I don't want to miss it. So with that, this was certainly a very engaging dialogue, as I knew it would be, around the issue of voting. But we've got to move into our last topic here, Black women rising. And I want to talk about that, the way forward and what the future looks like for Black women's political leadership. So nearly half a century after Shirley Chisholm made her pioneering run for president of the United States, becoming the first Black woman to seek the country's highest office on a major party ticket in 1972, the 2020 Democratic presidential primary saw California Senator Kamala Harris running in the spirit of Shirley Chisholm. But Harris's auspicious entry into the race faded last year as issues of race and gender would ultimately derail her presidential bid. Yet it was that same criteria that proved to be assets as eventual nominee Joe Biden, pressured by Black women to choose someone with their lived experience as his potential governing partner, selected Kamala Harris as his running mate, making her again a political trailblazer as the first Black woman and woman of color to be a vice presidential nominee of a major party. On a personal note, it was my honor to interview Senator Harris as the first person to interview her after she became the vice presidential nominee. We had a very robust conversation, which you can watch on 19th News' YouTube channel if you did not see it during our virtual summit. But Black women are not just running at the top of the ticket. A record 61 Black women are running for the US House in 2020, which is the largest group of any of the record number of women of color running for Congress this year. Currently, 7 Black women serve as mayors of major American cities, which is also a record. And next year, at least 2 Black women are running for governor of Virginia. So what does this all mean for how America views Black women's leadership? That's what I want to discuss with our participants now. Marilyn, I want to come back to you for a second, because you were somebody that I talked to about Senator Harris and really her pioneering political career, how she inspired women like you. Talk to me about that, and talk to me about what you think it means for somebody like her to be in the role that she is in now, already making history, but on the cusp of making even more history here.
So the one thing I need us to recognize is that the powerful, beautiful, bold, brilliant Black women on this call, we are the ones that are deciding not just national policy, but local policy in this country. They are looking to us to determine what is going to happen for the trajectory of our children and our grandchildren right now as we speak. They cannot win this election without us. And so understanding and recognizing that, you have an example in a Kamala Harris, the first Black state's attorney, district attorney for San Francisco, the first Black Attorney General of California, the second Black woman United States attorney who, senator, who is the only United States senator currently in office, right? Like, we have the power and the ability to change the trajectory of our communities. And so I don't want us to get lost in the fact of the power that we exhibit as Black women. What often happens is that they want to create these silos so that we're working in our respective, cities and states, and we're not collectively working together. And that's what I appreciate about Jess and even Errin. Like, I appreciate you bringing us together, because I recognize, like, being one of the first in the country to attempt to hold police accountable for the death of a Black man, right? And what comes with that, the backlash that comes with that, is that we have power in our, in who we are as a person, as a people. And so we have to recognize that, we have to appreciate that. And with that comes an awesome responsibility, but something that we are all up to task to ensure that we implement. And so I'm excited. I'm extremely excited about the prospect of getting who we recognize as a self-serving racist president out of office. I think that when it comes to being the foundation of our communities, when it comes to being the lifeline of our communities, that is the women on this call. We are the bold, beautiful, brilliant Black women that are going to change the trajectory for the United States of America. And they're going to call upon us, and it's up to us to ensure that we have set an agenda that is going to change the trajectory for our people. And so I'm excited. And Kamala Harris is a perfect example of that. She was there for me. I can tell you, not just on a professional level where I could look to her as a role model, professionally, but on a personal level. When I was going through the turmoil of, prosecuting police for the death of a Black man, an innocent Black man who made eye contact with police, who was unconstitutionally arrested, who was placed in a metal wagon, head first, feet shackled, whose pleas for medical attention were ignored after his spine was partially severed in the back of that police wagon. She reached out to me and was like, what can I do to ensure that I can be supportive of you? That is the importance of this call. That is the importance of what we have and the dynamics that are at play right now, is that we have to be there to support one another mentally, professionally, ethically. We have to support one another in our endeavors because it's greater than us. The mission that we are on and the task that has been handed to us and has always been handed to us since we're brought here as slaves in this country, is that the burden has been placed upon Black women, is that we have to do this, and we can't do this without each other. And so I'm encouraged, and I thank you for making me, inviting me and letting me be a part of this beautiful, bold, brilliant, beautiful Black women who are making moves across this country.
Well, thank you for that. And Genevieve, I hear you. We got real life happening here in the mix. So thank you for for joining us. I really appreciate it. I want to come to you, Crystal, because you're making a good point in the chat that I don't want to get lost for folks who are tuning in about really the barriers for Black women who are attempting to seek office or who maybe are thinking about running for office. What are the barriers for Black women, and what is the opportunity for Black women like those of us in here, or for folks who may be tuning in who want to get more Black women elected? What is the opportunity for them to help to do that?
Well, first of all, I think that the hugest barrier is a lot of Black women are convinced and are believed to be the background folks, the supportive folks, the people that do everything for everybody else except ourselves. So you have to ask Black women at least 7 or 8 times before they even consider wanting to run for office. After that, you have a lot of hoops, whether it's finances, money in campaigns. Black women tend to not ask for money as often as other candidates. And if we do, we're fine with the low dollar donations, which of course are important. And we want community folks to be able to give as much as they can. But that makes it harder for Black women to get the large dollars that can equal to ads, can equal to media attention, and all the other things that come along with running a campaign. I think once folks are actually at a point where they're taken viable as a candidate, and there's so many hoops, whether it's media coverage, as we saw the massage war used within the campaign for Senator Harris that was running, and even women on a local level, whether it's social media, whether it's this news about their personal lives and motherhood and all these things that come up as gendered ways to discriminate against candidates are just some of the biggest barriers that Black women and femmes have to face when running for office. I think what the opportunity is, particularly with the option of a vice president being a Black woman, it sets a really good example and precedent for what can happen on a local level as well. Similarly to how a lot of young Black folks, especially, were interested in running for office with President Obama. I think that same thing can happen with Senator Harris once she's elected to serve as vice president. What I also think will come with that is a different policy agenda and different issues being at the center. Like I spoke about a little bit earlier, Black women tend to think that everybody else's issues come before ours, especially as it relates to Black men in our communities. As a Black feminist, as a radical Black feminist, we need to get rid of that idea. We need to get rid of that notion. Black women are the first to be sexually assaulted. We're the first to be domestically violenced. We're the first to have reproductive justice issues going on within ourselves and our communities. Those are issues that deserve policy as well. Not just a Twitter conversation, not just campaigns and services. Obviously, services are important, but those are also policy solutions that have to be taken more seriously within our communities and within the country as a whole. The last thing I will say, I spoke a lot about what we should be doing differently and what we can do, but the world around us has to change as well. It always comes back to what Black women need to do. We need to ask for money. We need to do this, we need to do that. But people that have not been held accountable in a lot of ways end up getting away with a lot of those things. We need to be calling out media when they're being biased. We need to be calling folks to the fire that are putting more pressure on us at work in a safe way, of course, because we know that can come with risk. But if you're able, we have to be able to advocate for ourselves and speak for ourselves. And if somebody comes for me, all 30 of y'all are coming for them. So we need to get into that kind of attitude and notion as it relates to supporting Black women that want to pursue office, but also ones that don't, right? So it's not just about folks that want to be elected or folks that are leaders, but the everyday Black women in our lives as well also need to have that community and need to know that there's a community there that trusts them, that listens to them, that pays them, that cherishes them, and that's going to change the culture in regards to how we face politics in general. There would be no democracy without Black feminism. Let's be very clear. Intersectionality, identity politics, all these ideas that are now popular that folks are able to claim as their own, that's Black feminists. Those are Black women, and particularly a lot of Black lesbian women who we have not showed up enough for, Black trans women who we have not shown up enough for, and Black girls who we have not shown up enough for. So I think it's a really critical moment. I think there's a lot that can come out of this election. And when things go the way they need to, because I do believe that they will, hopefully that's just the start of a conversation, a long conversation that has been going on but needs to come with some teeth in regards to how some of these things that we've been dealing with for 400 plus years.
Yeah. Well, I saw a lot of heads nodding in there. So I'm gonna try to do a little lightning round here and talk about For those of you who saw the role that race and gender has played this year, particularly for the Black women who were in conversation around this deep stakes process, right? There were 6 Black women who were being seriously discussed, and there was some racist and misogynist language that came with that. I'm wondering what some of your reactions were to that, if you noticed it, if it resonated with you as a professional Black woman in your own lives who maybe has had to endure some of that. So here's what we're gonna do. I wanna do Jocelyn, Trina, Sharonda, and Paula. If I could hear from you all in that order on the role of race and gender in this election cycle.
Sure. Hi there. Thanks, Errin. I hope I don't derail the conversation too much, but the one thing that we haven't talked about tonight that I just wanted to make sure doesn't, we don't leave off the table is, for me, my job, my love is to build power for Black women. And I don't think we can do that unless we confront the issue that we have no wealth. And so I'm just always really wanting to think about, in a capitalist society, we can vote in people, and that's very important. But when we know that the real levers of power come from money and wealth, and right now single Black women have $200 median wealth. So I'm just really excited about thinking with all of you, if you're interested in how do we really think about building wealth, whether it's through home ownership or baby bonds or reparations. Like, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night and that I really think has to be on the ballot, because I just sort of feel like if we had that nest egg, it would influence, we would have more power. So we would have more power to do all sorts of things. So I just wanted to give that 2 cents, Errin, if that's okay.
That is crucially important, especially because we know all these inequalities that have been laid bare in this pandemic. Black women are really just so disproportionately impacted by all of those inequalities, and the wealth gap is a huge part of the reason for that. And again, if we're talking about the new normal, you've got a president that's been touting the stock market. That does not mean anything to a lot of Black women.
The fact that we see that billionaires have increased their wealth by $600 billion while you have 40 million Americans filing for unemployment insurance, something is totally off. So I just thought it would be good to just make sure we put a point on the need to really think about and come together to build wealth.
Yes, and you and I will be continuing to talk about that. So you just stay tuned. So who else did I point to? Who was after Jocelyn that maybe had some thoughts on race and gender? Anybody? Trina or yes,
hey.
Hi Trina.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me. When I think about race and sexism, I think about misogynoir, just really looking at the ways that anti-Blackness and sexism really impact and show up in Black women's leadership. I think makes me think about the quote by Malcolm X that the most disrespected person in the United States is a Black woman. The most neglected person in the United States is a Black woman. And so when I think about Kamala Harris and folks who are running for office locally, that just the ways that anti-Blackness and that we're policed around our gender and how we express ourselves, and the tropes around the angry Black woman, or, all of those tropes and the ways that they undermine our leadership. And I just like being on this panel with a group of dynamic, powerful Black women who are speaking truth to power. Like, don't let the misogynoir really shut us down. Really, we're at this point where it's we're unapologetically Black, and we're going to speak our minds and speak up regardless. And I also just, because Malcolm X said that statement, I also want to call on our Black men, our brothers, to also stand up and support us as Black women, because even right now, as Kamala, is getting these anti-Black and anti-sexist attacks, there are some of our brothers who are also involved in that. And so I think that as a community, we need all of us rooting for everybody Black, including the Black woman.
Absolutely.
I'll just sort of add that I sort of understood misogynoir and how it showed up in popular media sort of conceptually, right? And then when Congresswoman Bass was announced as a potential VP running mate, I understood it personally. So I grew up in Watts. I went to high school in her district. I remember when she started Community Coalition, right? And like learned to organize and participated in some of their early campaigns. And so knew her as someone who was like really about that life, as the kids say, right? And hearing how she was talked about in the media and seeing what the press was writing about her, I was like, this is not the same woman I know, right? This is not the woman whose work actually speaks for itself. This is not the woman whose work has left a lasting legacy in South Central, right? And so being able to sort of in real time see the narrative develop and for them to sort of cast her as this, I don't know, sort of radical villain. I was like, she has some radical visions for sure, right? But she is not here to sort of burn the whole thing down. And watching how easily that narrative gained traction, right? And watching how quickly even other Black people were willing to move to sort of discredit her, and all of the work she had done it was heartbreaking to me. I don't have another word for it, right? And so even looking at people who had lived in her district, who had seen her work, who had participated in it, who had seen the fruits of her labor latch on to that narrative, it was a reminder to me that we often assume that misogynoir happens or is directed at us for people from other communities, and we should actually be talking to the folks that we live with, right? That we are engaging with every day. And so I wanted to add that in the last few minutes.
Thank you.
I like to add that when I think of race and gender, I go back to one of the first topics, and that's the balance. We're always in a balancing act. I think we're like trapeze artists as Black women. We are always balancing the double whammies, the intersectionality that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so when you talk about the balancing act that we have to play, that in itself is so much stress on us. And because we are who we are and we do what we do, we have a way about working through the worst situations and making it look easy, making it look great to some, because we do it with style and we do it with grace and we do it in a way that we know we have to do to uplift the people around us that are depending upon us. We have to make sure that we put our chest out with an S on it as Superwoman sometime, but then we also have to recognize we got to pull up a shield sometime. That S has to be a shield that shields us from the negativity that we are talking about here, the kind of negativity and the kinds of forces that seek to pull us down and stop us from being the powerful source that we've talked about so much. I'm so inspired and feel so honored to be on a panel with such powerful, wonderful, enlightening women that do what we do. And not because we have a job to do, but because it's who we are. And we just recognize this, how we're standing on the shoulders of others that have done it for us, and we just do it for others and our family and our communities. And so at my role with the Black Women's Health Imperative and my role in life is to just make sure that we always look at taking care of ourselves first. Remember what they tell us on the airplane, put your mask on first, because we can't be anything, all the things we've talked about that we are doing and that we continue to do and that others depend on us to do. We can't do it if we aren't healthy and can't take care of ourselves. And so as I hear all this, I keep thinking of balance, the balancing act of being powerful, but also self-care and taking care of our power. We charge our phones without a doubt. We see the power running down on that phone, we put it in, we plug it in and get the power. And we got to do that for ourselves. I thought I was going to be called on kind of earlier in the conversation because my husband and I both had COVID. And I think about how that just shook up my life all around. Not just, we were blessed to get through the physical aspects of it, but it's been an emotional drain. And I think about my mom was in a nursing facility, and my mom, we couldn't see her. We couldn't go see her. We had to do window visits, and my mother ultimately passed. I know it's because she didn't have that interaction. And all that comes into play when I think of race and gender and all the things about us rising, because those are all emotions and aspects of everyday life that were, I think, in many ways, exacerbated. The effects of what we're all talking about were exacerbated because of who we are, Black women, juggling so much. So I just wanted to end with making sure that we always come back to taking care of ourselves. I think the only reason I made it through COVID and am able to talk about it today is because I live a healthy lifestyle and I help others live a healthy lifestyle. So I try to always live what I preach and practice what I preach. And I think we all have to do that as well. And that's why we rise. To bring it back to the question, I think we rise because in some way we know we have to take care of ourselves, and we do that. But I just want to keep reminding all of us of that's something we just have to do. And others depend on us. And so we're always committed to what others are expecting and need from us. But we got to remember, we got to take care of ourselves as well, because what good are we to anyone, collectively or individually, if we don't do that?
And I guess the only thing I would add is that the way that we take care of ourselves is to support one another in the way that we are right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, because if folks could drive a chasm between us and allow us to work in our respective little silos, then that is what they would love to be able to do. But when we collectively come together and we're able to say, no, this is our mission and this is what we're going to do, the power dynamic is so immense that it's intimidating. And so I just want us to be conscious of the fact that, like, when I was going through what I was going through, you know, 79, and let me just be clear, prosecutors are one of the most important stakeholders in the criminal justice system. They decide who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations they're going to make. They decide whether an individual is going to get into the criminal justice system in the first place. 95% of the prosecutors in this country making those decisions about people of color every single day are white. 79% are white men. As a woman of color, I represent 1% of all elected prosecutors in the country. And so making the decision that I did in attempting to hold police officers accountable for the death of a Black man in 2015, before the perceptions had changed, right? I got hate mail, I got death threats, I got, you know, they published my children's photos when I was getting the height of hate mail and death threats, and they described how my husband was going to be killed coming outside of my home and no police officers were going to respond. That moment, and in that sort of storm, you feel isolated. You feel like you're in this by yourself. But if you understand and you recognize that there are other Black women who are fighting right there with you, and that at the end of the day, we have held the Democratic Party on our backs, right? As Black women, if we understood our power, like, there's no way in hell I could feel isolated.
Right.
And so I just think that it's important. You're absolutely right, Paula, that we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, but there is also an importance in recognizing that in that moment, when I was going through everything that I was going through pre-Trump and all the social media and everything else that was coming at me, was that the moment was bigger than me. It was about what I represented to our community. Right. So you look at Errin Haines, who was the first state's attorney out of Orlando, who got subsequently elected, Kim Foxx out of Chicago, Kim Gardner out of St. Louis, you know, Diana Becton out of Contra Costa, California. You look at Rachel Rollins out of my hometown of Boston, right? Like, at the end of the day, it was always greater than me. And so what we have to understand and what we have to recognize is the power that we have collectively in our missions, and ensuring that we are supportive and encouraging one another in a way in which we can actually change the trajectory of this country. Because no other sort of demographic has the ability that we as Black women in this country have to do that.
And the fact that we do bond together and help each other the way that we have, you know, take care of ourselves to do that, I think is why we're so powerful and why we're rising and why we can help others and have others help others rise as well. So yes, absolutely.
I think that's exactly right. And Paula, let me just say, I'm so thankful that you and your husband were able to pull through that. And I'm so sorry about your mom. Just want to take a minute to say that and to let you know that we see you and that we are lifting you up in all that you have had to overcome in the midst of this season. Well, I mean, I have to say that we unfortunately are having to bring this conversation to a close much too soon. It is my shortcoming as a moderator that we were not able to get to everyone to hear every single perspective, but got to hear from so many folks, which just means that we have to come back and do another one of these. And so I hope that we will be able to do that. I want to thank all of our participants for their very thoughtful comments, and to all of you for your attention and interest tonight. Thanks also to the Raben Group and to Black Women's Health Imperative. I also want to encourage all of you to subscribe to the 19th. We have a free newsletter that is daily and also weekly, and to please check in with us for our 2020 election coverage in the coming days and beyond. Thank you for allowing me to moderate this conversation. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, stay safe, and obviously don't forget to vote. With that, I turn it back over to you, Jessica.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Thank you, Errin. Thank everyone. All of you were so amazing. This was exactly what we wanted to do and what we wanted to bring together. And I'm so grateful that you all stuck with us this evening. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we are 5 days until Election Day, and it's amazing to see so many people exercising their right to vote. But regardless of who ends up in the White House, they're only going to work as hard as we make them work. There should be no tension between supporting the person who could be our first Black woman vice president and advocating for what's best for Black America and Black women in America. We can do both. We should do both. There will be thousands of special interests and organizations calling on a possible Biden-Harris administration to deliver. Why shouldn't Black women be one of them? I want to thank you, all of the participants, for joining us tonight. And thank you, Errin, for your masterful facilitation of tonight's discussion. And again, to our partner this evening, the Black Women's Health Imperative. Please be on the lookout for more panel and policy discussions from the Raben Group, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night, everyone.